Well, finally, for all of our UK viewers, you have a show that you're able to see. I get messages all the time saying, why can't you have a show in the daytime so that we can be apart? So if you're having tea time over in, that's what we'll call it. We'll call this tea time with Jordan and Kyle. I think that's good.
Sounds good.
Perfect. But welcome, Jordan. It's Collver, right? I'm saying that correctly?
Yeah, drop the I sound, so just Culver, and then you've got
Okay.
it.
Awesome.
Gold.
Well, welcome. It's good to have you here.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
And for our Christian viewers, it would be a good time since you do it anyway to just say a prayer for the audio because mysteriously I dropped out completely out, and I thought that it was just going to be Jordan doing a one man show, but thankfully it popped up. But I think you could have done it. I really do. Okay, let me get situated. So
Well, looks like it's happened.
And there he goes again. Kyle, you lost your audio again.
At the very second that,
And
at
the very second he
began.
was talking about it. So,
Oh,
yeah,
guys, you didn't pray hard enough.
this is producer Dave filling in for Kyle Curtis. So this is supposed to be a show about the art of evidence. So I don't really know that much about what you do. So maybe we could start with that.
Yeah, sure. So basically, I kind of wear a couple of different hats. I'm a science communicator and a comic artist and a freelance illustrator, and I try and use the tools of art, illustration, and comics to talk about scientific concepts as much as I can. The nature of freelance art is I take whatever pays basically, but my passion is for looking at communicating scientific ideas through the medium of comics, which I think is uniquely equipped in a couple of different ways for doing that, for explaining complicated subjects in a nice, clear way that uses visual metaphor and stuff in a unique way that's different from prose, different from traditional illustration, photography, and film as well, which is a visual medium like comics, but isn't exactly the same. So those mediums are all great, and they all have fantastic applications. And I think comics is kind of like this burgeoning field that just in the past sort of 10 years, it's been really exploding in terms of talking about science as, I guess, a genre. So a lot of people talk about comics as a genre, when comics is a medium just like film is, and superhero comics are a genre of comics, and science comics are a genre of comics as well. So that's the one I'm really interested in.
Well, and I like that too because I've always been a fan of like, and I don't mean to compare it to the Sunday Funnies, but those people like, well, those are for kids, and like, no, most of those are very adult oriented, and or at least teenager oriented, and if you have educational comics, it's very it, it doesn't necessarily mean it's got to be oriented towards children, but it's good for all ages, and I think that's
Yeah,
important.
well, absolutely. I mean, yeah. So, firstly, I'm actually. It's certainly not true that comics are just for kids. However, I actually don't even mind that. I don't even mind that perception because I don't think that there's anything wrong with something being, for kids. There's
Oh no.
often the sort of presumption that if it's for kids, then it's like drivel, right? But a lot of great art came from things which were once viewed as being really trivial or, not highbrow. Um, and I don't know, you look at some phenomenal cartooning was used this way. So like in animation, television cartoons, those were just kid shows. But now you've got some fantastic comedy and drama animations for adults as well. So it takes time for people to kind of really explore all the possibilities of the medium. But I actually think that that's a big advantage as well with using comics to talk about science because that's kind of disarming for people. There'll be a lot of people who might feel alienated by science or think they might not be interested in it, and think, or maybe just think it's boring, or beyond them. So if you have something that's presented in a format that they're either already familiar with and enjoy, so if they're an existing comics reader, or if they remember them from their youth, or even if they're just not expecting that combination, right? Let's say they've never picked up a comic in their life, and they've never picked up a popular science book in their life, but they see this comic book about some famous scientist or some obscure scientific concept. They might go, "Well, that seems kind of like a novel idea. Let me check that out." So I think there's the opportunity for it to be sort of like unexpected way in to get people interested in something that might not otherwise be.
Yes, yes, definitely. I'm really not sure what Kyle had planned at this point. I know we have a slideshow of comics here. I don't really want
Do
to
you
get
think he
into
knows
that
that we can't hear him?
I'm telling him.
Okay.
He's dropped out again, and he I don't know if he rebooted again, but he's coming. He's trying to come back in. I'm gonna suggest he uses tablet or something to come back in, because this is his computer went out a couple days ago and something isn't working right. Nope. No
Carrier
dice.
pigeons have been lost somewhere between the computers. Yeah, well, I mean, I can just talk about science comics in the meantime.
Yes,
It's
yes.
fine by me.
Is yours the only science comic, or
No,
is this
there's a lot.
burgeoning-
Okay, wait, let me rephrase that. I'm going to take credit for all science comics and say, yes, my comic is the only science comic, and here it is. You can get it for the low price of free, which is true, by the way. If you email me, then I'll send you a copy of my comic for free. We can hopefully talk about that a little bit later. But no, there is a lot of science comics. I'm going to do something that might be risky, and I'm going to move my screen here, and I'm going to try and shoot a pile of science comics which I have collected just for this purpose. Can you see those books down there?
Yes, yes, we can.
So that's just some of the ones that I've got. I've got maybe a couple dozen science comics, and those are just the ones that I've kind of been able to get my hands on. But they range from subjects like, we've got one on quantum mechanics here. We've got mysteries of the quantum universe. We've got comics about Jane Goodall and early primatology. We've got comics on Richard Feynman, on evolution, on climate change, which is, there's a fantastic one on climate change, neuroscience. I mean, you name it, there are people making comics about these things. And the cool thing about it is, you get a real interesting mixture of creators doing this. So it's not just scientists who know how to draw and put those two things together, although that very much is the case. So there's a book here called Neurocomic, and that is the product of a collaboration between a neuroscientist and a neuroscientist who is also an artist. So he did the art for that. So they're both, right. They're both science and art. You also get other times where it's just somebody like me who's not a scientist, just an artist who is interested in science, and they might either work with the scientist to do like fact checking and really get to grips with the knowledge, or just do a deep dive and try and understand the science as much as possible and write it that way. Or collaborative teams. So you get people who are a scientist, they can't draw though, and you get an artist who can, they want to work together, and they create this collaborative work. In a way, I really like those examples, because you kind of get people from different backgrounds, different experiences, that are bringing to bear their expertise in both of those fields, without relying on those really rare instances where someone can do both. Like, I would love it if I was also a professional scientist and could kind of just have that knowledge and expertise just in the reservoirs of my brain, but it's not the case. So yeah, I like collaborating with kind of researchers and getting to the bottom of what they do. So the short answer to your question is no. I am not the only science comic. I'm just one of a few of an ever growing number, and they're brilliant. So I would be very embarrassed to say mine's even in the same league as theirs. But
Well, I think that's awesome, because when I was a child growing up, there was, and this was in the '70s, so it's a whole different ball game now. There wasn't a lot of stuff for children and to get into science. There wasn't a lot of books. There was the textbooks in school, basically. That was what you had access to, other than libraries, to get into science. There wasn't a lot of relatable material, and I think that comics are very relatable for people. Just the format and the media that is comics tends to be friendlier to relate to for a lot of people. And when you
absolutely, and more so, like it can be familiar, like you say. I don't know if you grew up reading comics, but people, like, everybody knows what a comic is, and there's some kind of well, especially now where comics and comic culture has entered the mainstream pop culture, right? You've got now big Hollywood movies that are made of it, where it was before comics used to be kind of a niche interest, whereas now they're as big as it gets. They're on Superhero comics are owned by Disney now, so everyone is very aware of comics, and I think when you see that, yeah, like you say, it just feels really accessible, and in a different way that, gosh, yeah, a school textbook is just not going to cut it. You're not going to get a kid beyond just the nerdiest kids like I was when I was a kid, who's going to go to the library and like grab a look at pictures of mitosis in a biology text. That's not going to happen. But you put that in a comic with story layered on top, with really cool visuals and characters, you've got yourself, I think, something that can capture people's imagination. It doesn't have to just be kids, although they can use that excuse if they want to, because there's like a weird phenomenon where even not just comics are meant for kids, but I don't know. You go into a lot of there's the expectation that even learning is for kids. You go into a lot of museums and you see the parents standing back, not really engaging with exhibitions, while their kids are really having fun and devouring all the new and exciting information. Because I don't know what happens when you graduate from school. Culturally, there's some kind of expectation that, okay, I'm done learning now. Now I'm just gonna focus on adult stuff, which doesn't include curiosity and wonder about the natural world and ongoing kind of lifelong learning, which I think is a real shame. So this kind of is a way to hopefully short circuit that and go, hey, do you remember being a kid? Do you remember how exciting that was, learning stuff? Well, here's a chance to do that again.
Cool. All right. I think Kyle's back with us. Say something, Kyle.
Oh man, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I have. So let me let you guys know what happened to me yesterday, because I didn't tell this on the show yesterday. But I'm doing this video about, it's kind of a play on Halloween, but it involves Freddy Krueger's second cousin named Dunning-Kruger, and I needed a voice to sound kind of like Freddy. So I went online and I was searching through these like different voice changer apps or software that you could download, and there were 3 that I found that seemed like they could do what I needed. So I downloaded them, and I went to open up the 3rd one, which was something like virtual personality or something like that. But as soon as I opened up the file, it scanned across my screen, and I knew that I had downloaded some sort of infected file. It was a virus. So I started freaking out. I closed everything down. I booted into safe mode. I launched Malwarebytes, and it took off like 100 and some different threats that they found. But then after it restarted it, I got stuck in that loop where it was saying, we're trying to recover your Windows, and it never would come back on. So I wound up losing everything that was on that computer. I just went ahead and did a full reset of the computer, and ever since then,
Oh, brutal.
I can't get anything to work. So I apologize for that. I'm on my iPad right now. Thankfully, Apple makes things that don't break. So thank you, Apple. And yes, that is a dig at you Android users. So, but yeah, I apologize for that. So what did I miss? Where were we?
We were just talking about science comics. I was just kind of rambling on about how cool comics are and how you can use them to talk about science and how comics ain't just for kids.
Awesome. Um, that's that's kind of where I was going to start out, but I wanted to go a little bit like back further into your personal story. Like, were you a believer, and if you were, what type of like young Earth creation, or were you a theistic evolutionist? Because I think that kind of shapes the way that your comics are going to come out, obviously. So maybe give us a
Yeah,
little
absolutely.
backstory
I
on that.
mean, yeah, and we'd sort of mentioned, I sort of mentioned just before we went live that I think a lot of my scientific curiosity came after I sort of deconverted. So let me contextualize my current passion with a little bit of backstory. I used to, yeah, I mean, I was raised and grew up for most of my life so far as a conservative evangelical Southern Baptist creationist Protestant Christian. I was a Calvinist. I believed kind of like the full, quite
Oh
a
wow,
hardcore Calvinistic doctrines. That was my own personal choice as well, because my parents actually weren't Calvinists, but I thought that was probably, I felt that was the most theologically consistent position. So lo and behold, I became a Calvinist. Also, a lot of my kind of role models at the time, my youth pastor, my pastor, some of my close friends, they were also of that theological persuasion. So yeah, I was young Earth creationist. I thought that evolution was wrong. I didn't. I wouldn't say I was a conspiracy theorist. I didn't think there was like this cabal of scientists who were actively trying to deceive people. Rather, I thought that it was just a natural consequence of people's fallen sinful natures that they wouldn't perceive reality in the way that God wanted them to, and that evolution was sort of a misinterpretation of the data, right? So,
sure.
yeah, I didn't think that scientists were evil, that evolutionists were sinister. I just thought that they were, sinful people
Lost.
like everybody, including Christians. Yeah. So, that was the context in which I grew up. I loved nature when I was a kid, though, right? I would collect little bugs and beetles and pupae and stuff, and put them in my bed sheets, and they would hatch into moths and stuff like that, much to my grandmother and parents' chagrin. But
I'm sure they love that.
that I'm sure they did. I mean, and that's kind of that's cute for a kid, right? To be doing that kind of stuff. But I didn't. At a certain point, when you are passionate about nature and stuff, rather than just, hey, what's the name of this bug? Evolution starts to really become quite an important intellectual way of framing an understanding of biology, right? So I kind of started to hit that barrier as I continued to pursue that interest into my early teens. And essentially, that just meant that I lost interest in it because, um, as I say, yeah, I kind of rejected evolution. So it would have been great if I had have pursued a zoology degree, say, in my university years. But I thought, why would I go to a secular university and learn about evolution? So I also started to think that why would I learn about creation when I could learn about the creator? So yeah, sure, nature is cool and all, but it's just a signpost to God. So I should focus on either maybe doing a theology degree or studying history so that I can um, basically understand with certainty how the Bible is a perfect historical document, right?
Ah, did you go to a Christian college?
I didn't go to a Christian college, university. I did go to a
Mhm.
Christian elementary school, though. So
Okay.
I was, yeah, I went to in a small rural town in Canada, kind of near Toronto, I guess. Went to this little Christian church. Gosh, it actually started in the basement of a church, but then by the time I went there, it had sort of branched off into its own school, and that's where we had Bible class, we had biology, and we would learn good science. The science teacher, he's actually amazing, but he also thought evolution wasn't true. I have a memory of we were editing our textbooks to kind of with markers, we were crossing out every instance where it said adapted or evolved, and then wrote, we crossed those out, and then instead of adapted, we said specialized, and instead of evolved, we said created.
Oh man,
So
I can hear Steve crying right now.
yeah. So that's where I'm coming from in terms of my formative childhood years, right? Then went to a normal secular high school where I encountered the real world, which I must say was not as threatening and
A lot more fun.
sinful as I had been led to believe. Well, because I was still I was really straight edge and really sincere about my kind of I was really, I guess, in retrospect, I was pretty far down the rabbit trail of what I guess you could call purity culture, right? So I was almost obsessed with, and I'm going through puberty at this time too, so it's fully on my mind all this, but I'm thinking, nope, that's all sinful and worldly. I need to focus on. So I didn't hang out with anybody in high school outside of my my Christian friends from church. I would
That is
leave
willpower.
willpower or just kind of being a social outcast. But yeah, it was by design. I didn't want to be tempted. I didn't want to smoke pot or get drunk or cuss and all this. I really didn't. So I missed out on a lot. And as a result, I have a huge kind of cultural blind spot during those years. I know any secular music. I remember them playing when I was in the shopping mall and stuff, but I have no connection to all of these, 90s and early 2000s albums that all of my peers
What?
know.
You missed
Yes,
NSYNC, Britney Spears, 98 Degrees.
You
This is a
betcha, man. No,
travesty. This is a
worldly
travesty.
stuff. And as we know, Lance Bass from NSYNC, he's gay, so good thing. I wasn't listening to that music. Probably my parents think, otherwise I would have been corrupted. No, that's unfair to them. Anyway, So the point being, it took me a really long time to kind of come out of that world, and then it wasn't really until I went to university, and I did incidentally study a history degree with this in mind. Like I said, I took biblical scholarship, kind of looking at ancient textual sources and all that kind of stuff, to basically try and piece together, to prove, to equip myself with secular evidence for why the Bible is true. Unfortunately, that did ultimately the exact opposite of what I had intended it to. That was like the beginning of my intellectual undoing of my faith in the Bible, and thus these cascading effects that came after that. But there were also social factors as well that were happening at the same time, because I just don't think you can stay in that world for that long and actually be curious about the world without running into some problems, which definitely
Sure.
started to happen in those years.
The question is, do you write off those problems or make excuses for those that are completely untrue or unfounded, or do you sort of face those? Like, that's what happened with me. I had several different things that kind of happened all at once. It was really weird. But what was it with you that was the final straw that broke the camel's back? Like, was there a single moment that happened where you said, okay, I can't brush this aside. I can't square this. This means that there's something wrong with the way that I've been believing all these years?
There isn't, but I would say that it's essentially that realization dawned on me subconsciously over a period of time. So the best analogy that I have for the experience, and maybe you can relate to this as well if you went through a similar thing, is the movie The Truman Show, where Christoph, Ed Harris, the God character in that film, he says, we accept the reality with which we're presented, right? So Truman, for those who haven't seen the film, actually forget it. I'll just assume everyone's seen The Truman Show. Come on.
They have.
He lives in what is clearly an artificial world, but he has no reason to disbelieve it, right? And I think to outsiders of a certain religion, it's like, well, why would anyone ever believe that? It's clearly fake, or not true. But for people in that reality, you accept that reality. And just like with Truman, it didn't just suddenly click that this is that he was living on a film set, spoilers, TV set, actually. But it gradually unfolded, right? He started to get sneaky suspicions. He got hunches. He started to feel a little paranoid. But then eventually this reality topples around him. And then it's not until, he gets the motivation to sail across the sea. And even then, when he crashes into the wall, the edge of the film set, he's still dumbfounded by being presented with that, blunt force trauma of the falsehood of his presuppositions, right? So that's kind of parallel to my journey, where I got a lot of signs along the way, and I started to slowly take them to heart and think, yeah, no, I think this is wrong. I don't think that I believe this anymore, or that I should believe this anymore. But I didn't want to accept that, so you keep submerging it because you're comfortable with the world that you live in. But then, yeah, he has the conversation with God, so to speak. And sorry, I'm just plugging my laptop in here. He has the conversation with God, offered the chance. He says, you can stay here, and the reality that you understand, that is controlled, that has this creator looking out for you, or you can walk through this blank black door. You don't know what's out there. The world is not revolving around you, and he chooses that. And I like to think that's what I did as well. Like I've talked to friends, who had a lot of the same doubts I did, and they decided to. Well, maybe it wasn't a decision. They were ultimately able to stay inside that. They chose to sail back. Having gone through the same kind of journey, they didn't leave. And even though it can be harder, yeah, I in real terms, I don't know what represents that act, though. I think, I said to you earlier, I was about 24 years old when I can look back and kind of confirm with any certainty that I identified as an atheist, because I was sort of writing ostensibly a diary, I suppose, of my internal turmoils and thoughts. And it was at 24 years old, I'm now 31 almost, that I was comfortable internally identifying as an atheist, although I did not tell anybody that for quite a while after. So yeah, that's a really long way to say, no, there was no kind of one moment that I had to part ways. It was just this really gradual thing. And at a certain point, you get all the erosion under the foundations that happens so slowly. And then, yeah, there's that toppling moment that happens. It collapses under its own weight. It's no longer sustainable. And I suppose that thinking now, my answer to that would be moving to England. So I mentioned I was from Canada. I moved to England. I needed to get out. I guess that's me walking through the black door. That's the foundations collapsing. I just needed to leave.
And I just wanted to clarify something for people, maybe if they haven't seen the Truman Show. What he actually hit in our reality is the ice wall that the flat earthers talk about. He actually came to
that's right.
Everybody,
oh man,
because everybody brings up that's not the first. That's probably like the sixth time that's been brought up on this show alone. A lot of people, whether it's, I believe the Plain Truth used the Truman Show as an example for one of his points in a flat Earth debate. But there's so many different things that shows,
in terms of pro flat Earth.
Yes, well, not well. It was he was making the point that the ant, with that scene where the teacher talks about the ant on, I can't remember exactly how it was worded, but it was an example of, are you going to believe what you're told, day in and day out and indoctrinated with, or are you going to go out and search for yourself? And he was saying that the flat Earth movement is like that. They're the ants that are going out to find answers for themselves, and we're the ones that are just happy. I
gotta say though, that's a pretty bad comparison to make, because of course in that film the false reality that he lives in is in a flat dome world, and then he passes through that veil, and then of course full reality is a fucking globe, isn't it? So they really messed up that one.
It's kind of a beautiful thing, I think. I sitting there listening to it, I was like, this couldn't be any better.
The Truman Show is great. Incidentally, my dad loves that movie because he looks at it from a Christian analogy, right? And he's like, oh, once you see the Christ, then you realize that all of the worldly things in this world are just frivolous, and he has the exact inverse interpretation of me, which I got to say, that's the mark of a good film as far as I'm concerned, if people can can do that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was brilliant. How's your relationship with your parents now? Do they know? Are you out with your disbelief, or is
Oh,
that something?
I sort of just, I guess I jumped ship on having to deal with that by just moving. So I figured geographical separation is easier than that kind of having that confrontation, um, because I just haven't
Wow.
had to have that conversation yet. I just haven't had to. For the first maybe 7 years I've been over here. I've been over here for almost 10 years now. They would ask, "Oh, have you found a church yet?" And I'd be like, "Oh, no, England just doesn't have any good churches. It's all this watered down Church of England crap. No solid, teachings of the Bible." So I used that one for a while. And then I think maybe they eventually got the hint and then sort of stopped asking. But I think in a parent's heart of a Christian background like mine and maybe perhaps yours, they always just assume, well, he still believes, but he's just maybe prodigal, a wayward son who, he still believes in Jesus and stuff, of course, but I don't think they realize the extent to my disbelief, and not that it's been me being lured away by the wiles of the world while I've been over here, but rather the other way around. It was a conscious choice for me to leave because I'd already made that kind of moral crossroads, right? So no, they don't know really.
Are you
I
worried that they'll see
I've
you like
sh-
on some of these live streams, or somebody will recognize you? And that was my first
I
thought
think it's
when I started
I
doing
think
this.
it's very well. When I let's think. So I talked with. This is the third time I've done one of these, and it's the third time I've talked publicly about it. I've never really. I realized I was talking to Shannon Q a few weeks ago, and that was the first time I've actually sort of like vocalized my deconversion story publicly, to people that might hear it. I have told two of my closest friends, who are still very much Christians, and they took that very hard. But we sort of shared everything, and it's a little easier to tell friends than family, I think. Yeah, I'm genuinely worried about breaking my mother's heart, for example. Part of me, like a very serious question of mine, is will it be better for her to go to her grave thinking that her son is a Christian and will be going to heaven?
Hmm.
And I just don't know, like, what should I prioritize? Should I be true to myself and just be like, "Hey, mom, guess what? In your worldview, I've basically just opted for eternal
That's
damnation,
easy to say.
and
That's easy to
see
say,
ya."
but not so hard. Not so easy to do. I think there will be people that say yes, you should be yourself, but I'm very practical in the fact that I know that uh, that's easier said than done. Number one, it's your mother. I mean, this is a different thing altogether. And it was interesting when my family learned about, they know now. Most of them know now what I do. On a daily basis. I'm very anti-theist, not just atheist. I'm very anti-theist, and um, they were more they were more upset about me saying that I'm an atheist than they were when I came out as gay. I think that they
Oh,
were
really?
completely fine. Yeah, they were completely fine with that, but it was the atheist word that they had an issue with.
Well,
And
yeah.
of
I
course,
mean, you can be a gay Christian, right? But you can't be a Christian
I
atheist.
not in the South, not in the Southern Baptist Church. No, absolutely not. Which and that's what ultimately pushed me out was that the I knew that I was gay, and yet I'm going to a place 3 times a week where I'm hearing that it's an abomination. It's bad, it's wicked, and I had already been through the stages where I had prayed for it to go away and genuinely wanted that. And after that just kept getting put on the back burner, I started realizing that maybe it's not something I can give away. Maybe it's not something I'm choosing um, to do, and then that kind of grew into a resentment for it. But
Mm.
that's that kind of conditioning every single week in and week out. It prepares you for a an anvil to drop when you tell your parents. Luckily, I was very lucky. I probably gained people by coming out. I didn't lose anyone, and no one, at least to my face, say anything negative about it. Either they already knew, or um, they were happy that I finally came out. But the religion thing is something that's just not talked about. Like I'll have I'll have people in my family ask me if I'm dating or seeing anyone before they will ask me, "Have you came back around yet? Are you back in the faith?" So it's quite funny how that's a touchier subject than the gay thing.
Wow. So did you stagger that? Did you come out as gay first and then come out as an atheist later? And then coming out as an atheist kind of softened the blow, or did you just do it all at once? Say like, "Hey, here's my story," and because
It,
obviously they're part and parcel, but
well, it was kind of both. I was the last time that I really went to church, like where I was going and actually walking in a believer, like this is going to be a good service, and I can't wait to get a message, that sort of thing. It was a Sunday night. I was at a youth group, and at the end of the youth group, there were some guys laughing at a video, and went over and watched the video. It was an Aaron Ra video where he was on the atheist experience. They were talking about slavery, and I remember going, God doesn't condone slavery. That's not in the Bible. I've been going to church for 25 years, and that's never been a thing. Like God does not condone slavery. And I went home and looked at the verse he was talking about, and it was there. And so I started watching his videos, and he has a lot of videos where he goes and talks. He does like public speaking, so he'll go in front of different states and groups of people, and he'll give talks. And there was one talk where I remember him saying something like, it was focused towards the LGBTQ community and how they shouldn't feel inferior and they shouldn't like not be themselves. And it was almost like it was like, whoa, he's talking to me right now. And so I
yeah.
decided then that I can just shed both of these at one time and be done with it all, and wipe my hands with it and move on. So that's what I did.
Wow. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah, that's definitely an added dimension of complexity to that sucks you had to kind of go through that, but yeah, props for kind of for getting through it and being where you are. And it's cool that actually because Aaron Ross is based in Texas, isn't he?
yes. Mm-hmm.
So he was kind of, I guess, in the same area. Yeah, these things, it's funny because in a Christian context, people would be like, "Oh, these things happen. God wanted this to happen." But that's like the God of atheism wanted this consilience
I
of
thought that
events
same thing
for.
just a second ago. I was like, wow, I can't say that this was meant to be, because that would imply some sort of.
Yeah. No, but it's true. Yeah, because I mean, you can apply that same logic to any story. There's a lot of weird coincidences in my life that exactly like I'm like, hey, if you think that those kinds of coincidences that you attribute to God, God's will in your life, then I got a bit of a spoiler for you, because he's been doing a lot of that same shenanigans in my life, but leading me in the complete opposite direction. So what do you think? What do you think is going on there? And I have an idea that they would call that the devil, but that's a little bit simplistic.
Well, if it is the devil, at least he wants you to be your true self. That's what I say. And the thing is, I'm more pissed. The reason you have a lot of people like ask me, I get emails or comments all the time on videos that we do, and they say, why don't you just shut up, or why don't you just leave religion alone? Like, why don't you just be an atheist and not interfere in what other people believe, or what their faith is? And my response is always, because it's not just that. Like, if people would believe something and stop there and be comfortable believing whatever they believe, and leave everyone else alone, it would be a nice, happy world. But it's not a nice, happy world. And the problem is that you have people that attach themselves to a belief that's unfounded, and then they start going, well, you need to believe this too. Why don't you believe this? And then they start making laws based on these beliefs.
That's
and the
right.
thing is,
Yeah,
I
it's
wasted
not even you need to believe this, but you need to live this way. Like you can't be gay, or you need to live your life this way, even if you don't believe this, which is sinister.
25 years I wasted because of a belief in something that has no evidence for it, and in fact, if anything, it proves the opposite. I at least know, or I can at least say with confidence, that the God of the Christian Bible does not exist. I don't think you'll have any rational thinking atheists say that you can say 100% no gods exist, but at least that one doesn't. But when you waste a quarter of a century because of something that was just made up a long time ago by, some some shepherds in a field, it tends to
Yeah, you
rub you
feel
the
kind of
wrong
cheated,
way.
don't you?
Yeah.
Exactly,
Well,
yeah.
you don't want to
And
see
it's
other
not even
people
like people are
do that.
lying to you. You just sort of, yeah, exactly. And you raise a good point, because it's not just people believing things, like you say, why can't you just let people believe what they want? Because exactly like, it's a really good point. They don't just believe, they act on those beliefs. I mean, some Christians don't. Some Christians, it genuinely is a private kind of
Sure.
internal sense of meaning and sort of purpose and peace and whatever in their life, and it motivates them to be loving and stuff. But I got to tell you, like, had we met when I was a teenager, I would not have accepted the fact that you were gay. I would not have accepted that that was a lifestyle you should lead. And like, that sucks. I think back at the person I was, and the reason I didn't come to that conclusion myself to be against gay people. I
Sure.
felt I felt that that is what I need to do as a Christian. And
As
it
a
just
gay
sucks
as a
to
gay
think that
person,
there
I
are
didn't accept
people who,
myself. That's
yeah,
the
well,
genius of
exactly.
the
And
religion.
that's even more sadistic, that it makes people do that, right? You can't even accept yourself, let alone other people that you otherwise would. So I think
Mhm.
that is a valuable contribution. Like, if people who otherwise would be good and accepting and loving to their fellow humans are sort of like kind of put in these moral straitjackets to behave in a way that is not good, shall we say?
Right.
That's not so good. And I think if you can change that, is sure. I mean, I'm not. It's not my mission to deconvert people, but then on the other hand, I also think it's a valuable service, because looking back on my journey, it was absolutely imperative and instrumental to have other people voicing these opinions. Otherwise, I never would have got here, right? I watched atheist YouTubers, I read atheist books, these strident, kind of shrill, offensive voices can work.
Hmm.
Because otherwise you don't hear them, right? You don't hear the stories. And I think what was most valuable for me was hearing the testimonies, I'll borrow that word, from former Christians like yourself. I think I never really put much stock in what atheists had to say who were never Christians, because they would very often not have a very good grasp of the Bible. They wouldn't really represent what I perceive as my beliefs. But heck, when you have somebody who knows every single kind of argument that you can throw at them, and they're like, hey, not only do I know what you're going to say, but I used to believe that, like, internally. No longer
And
do. I
it's
think
not
that
my.
that's very powerful.
It's never my goal or mission for what we do here is not at all to ever deconvert anyone. Like, I'm not interested in trying to change, somebody at a Siri doesn't understand at a level like that. It's never a deconversion thing and a lot of people think that too. They think that atheist activists, it's their goal to go and crusade and get everybody back on this side of reason and logic. And it's not about that. What it's about for me anyway, just personally, is being a voice that says you don't have to do like I did and waste 25 years because a group of people look at you because you're different and say, we don't like that. You have to conform to what we are. I think that's disgusting, and I think that's no way society should be. And as long as they are, on their side, preaching their gospel and the stuff that's just divides this country and the world, really. I mean, it drives a wedge between people. I want to be at least someplace that says, "What is Siri getting all up in my conversation for?" Um,
She's
I at
probably a
least want to
Christian.
be that kind of counterweight to those, even if if people hear it, great. If they don't, at least I know it makes me, in some way, it's cathartic for me. It's like getting those years back that I spent that are wasted, because they are wasted. I mean, that's the only way to look at it.
No, then that's totally fair enough, and I think like that sense of catharsis also rings true to me as well, because ultimately, you're doing what you feel is right, and that is to kind of make up for the lost years, so to speak, and hope that other people don't make those same what we would view as mistakes. But then on the other hand, it's not even that. I would certainly agree. I think it's the wrong approach to actively try and deconvert people, but you're essentially just putting that story out there because you want people to you want people to come to that conclusion themselves, and you're representing that perspective. Because like, if they're going to come to it's going to be a lot harder if every single person needs to forge that path themselves. But if they can find other people who have gone through it, if they can, you basically then get a guide, to take you through. Because they fought that battle as well, and that can be such a weight off your shoulders. Like, I genuinely did not think that there were other people on the planet who had lost their faith like what I was going through. I read a comic book, incidentally, called Blankets, and in that graphic novel, he kind of chronicles his sort of changing his loss of faith. He remains, I guess, a theist, or even a Christian by some standards, but he definitely goes through this transformation of faith. That was the first time I had ever even seen that represented. I didn't know that apostasy was a process that could happen in the real world. And the first thing I did was reach out to him. I was like, "Gosh, like, you went through this too? Like, can we talk about this?" I mean, he's a huge comic artist. So I was barking up the wrong tree, but then I discovered this thing called the internet, right, where there is a lot of people out there doing the exact same stuff, and that's a lot less alienating, because boy, when you're just sort of stuck in that subculture, and the only person you could talk to is your friends and your family, and they would say, "Well, have you spoken to the pastor?" And guess what? He's just going to tell you what you already know, or "Oh yeah, sure,
Right.
pursue those doubts," as long as at the end of those corridors there's a door that says, "Just trust in God, and whatever you do, don't peek behind that door. Just trust in God." But
it's a dead end.
Yeah, that's not good advice.
My fear is, now, though, with what I do now, sometimes I toss and turn at night, going, "Okay, I wasted the first 25 years of my life on God. Am I really going to waste the next 25 years of my life on flat Earth?" That would be no way to go through the first 50 years of
Well, so incidentally, I think like, I sort of I wonder that a little bit about, so when I lost all of my existing worldview, you have to basically build it from scratch, right? It was sort of a ship of Theseus situation, where I had gradually replaced one plank with another secular plank, until I have kind of the worldview that I do now. But I essentially had to construct that myself. I had to find something that I found to be compelling, logically consistent, that I could live my life by, and I did. And so science very much filled that gap for me, I guess, right? Because you had, I was just used to having this catechism of belief. This is what you should believe. This is what the purpose of life is, and all of that. That was all gone. And so I did fill that with a very vigorously renewed interest in science and nature, like I had when I was a kid. I got that back with a vengeance. And then so I was thinking, okay, well, what can I do with my life? I used to want to be a pastor. I used to want to, be a historian that could prove the Bible was true. But now what? And so science, I've tried to devote what skills I have. I kind of missed the boat on being a scientist, but I have my artistic abilities, which I can bring to bear and try and talk about science, because learning about, as I learned about science, that also helped me along kind of along my deconversion path. That's not to say that to learn about science is to become an atheist, but it did kind of work that way for me. Because it was complementary at the time. But now I've often gone like, okay, so I've become a science communicator, which is essentially, I don't want it to be that I'm now just like an evangelist of a different kind, where I've just taken that exact same passion and desire and kind of purpose in my life and then just re-plugged it into something else. Mind you, if you're going to, I think science is a fantastic thing to do, but
Yeah, I don't see the issue there.
no, it's not an issue, but I just sort of find it interesting that I've just sort of found a one-to-one. And I know that there will be people from my past who would go, "You found a new god." Basically, science is your
it's
idol.
funny that you say that.
I'm thinking,
It's funny that you say that. There's a study that was out. We did a couple of videos on this a couple weeks ago, but this journal did a study, and millennials today, I can't remember the exact percentage, so I'm not even going to attempt to put it out there, but religiosity in millennials has tanked. Like they're either they're identifying as not religious or atheist, that kind of thing. It's the people who represent the religion in the millennial group is just low. But what's happening as a result of that is that there's a spike in millennials that believe in things like conspiracy theories, pseudoscience.
yeah,
They're
anti-vaxxers.
replacing, right, exactly. They're replacing that kind of hole, I guess, or that need for something to latch onto, something more that's it's more than them, more than just their single being. So it's an interesting trend that's happening now. You're getting less of the religious people, but you're increasing on the people who believe in things that are harmful, not only to
Yeah,
them but directly to other people. So
yeah.
the
No,
question then
it's a
becomes:
really
is that
interesting
trade-off
point.
worth it?
Well, and it also flies in the face of. I mean, I know a lot of people who think that maybe it's overstating their argument, but essentially all of the world's problems would be resolved if we eliminated religion, right? Like a religion is the source of a lot of all of the world's problems. If we got rid of it, it'd be okay. And I just don't think that's true because that's a perfect example where you have people who are not religious at all. A lot of them are even atheists, and they also believe in getting rid of religion does not get rid of irrationality. That's the problem. I think that there's an essentially our brains like to look for these kind of grand patterns and stuff. And I think a lot of people, despite the fact that a lot of the times it's a scary situation of control where you have these powers that are controlling the world, there's still some sense of comfort knowing that their pattern or purpose to what's going on. You have a cabal of evil corporations controlling things, reptilian people doing it, you name it. But essentially, it's not the maybe the bleak reality that we are stuck on the surface of this rock that is spiraling through the void of space with no other
Fake
kind of
news.
guiding hand other than the laws of physics. That's
Yeah.
it. So that if that kind of freaks people out in today's secular age, if they don't have a religion to kind of soothe, I think, what are genuine human existential concerns that exist, whether you're religious or not. If religion doesn't come and swoop that in, like you say, they're going to find something else. And if that's a flat Earth, if that's God, any of the other things that are out there, anti-vax, climate denial, that
Possible
does seem to be
denial.
what happens. Yeah,
And I don't think that it would getting rid of religion would solve all the world's problems either. Now, I do think that it would be beneficial for society in the long run, but I don't think that it would solve all the problems. I look at things like the increase in conspiracy and the things like flat Earth and anti-vaxxers as a people just want to feel like, whether it be a god or a conspiracy, they want to feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. So they know, them as just themselves are just this tiny little speck in this big grand scheme of things. But they want to be a part of a movement, or a part of a movement that's been persecuted, because a lot of it comes from that too. Like somebody's lying to you. Somebody
yeah,
committed a sin thousands of years ago that you have to pay for. There's this
hmm
like there's a injustice that has been done, and
Yeah.
it is now on them to right that wrong, no matter what. And I think that if people would get a hobby, like go to the gym or join a knitting club in the time spans that they would originally do flat Earth study, or get on a hangout, go to the gym or go read or do something else, then we could be a happy, pleasant planet.
Yes. Yeah, no, I agree. And it's actually, I mean, it's not a coincidence that I think a lot of these groups kind of use the rhetoric of truth and lies. They're the ones who know the truth. Um, Going back to that Truman Show metaphor, I guess they're the Truman who knows. They're the enlightened ones. They've got the truth. They need to tell other people. Heck, I mean, in a very real sense, religion is just sort of a very old, very high functioning conspiracy theory. Like you said, you have different kind of entities warring for power. There's this evil force called sin that is kind of underlying a lot of the bad things that happen in the world. The
But
truth.
where
You
does
need to
sin come
convince
from?
other people about it. Where
Where
does
does sin
sin
come
come
from?
from?
Yeah, what
Yeah, this is the thing
what did
that's this is the it pisses me. It started to once I started to think about this, even when I was a Christian, I was pretty tricky to reconcile, because essentially, sin is God's active curse on humanity. Like, sin is every single baby that's born. God makes the active decision to go, I am going to renew the lifetime sentence of this curse that I put on these ancient ancestors. I'm going to
but
now
for
apply
what?
it to this. Yeah, I can't quite figure that out.
No, I mean, what happened? What happened to I know you know the answer to this, but what happened to cause sin to be introduced? Like somebody did something in a garden. What did that person do that resulted in us now having to deal with sin for the rest of eternity?
Well, the physical act was eating a fruit, but the moral act was that they disobeyed God.
But what was the tree that she ate? That she tried to eat from?
Yeah, the tree is called the tree of knowledge, the tree of knowledge of
Mm.
good and evil. So essentially, by eating of the fruit, so in retrospect, I think we weren't given our humanity by God's inbreathing through the nostrils of Adam. I think that we became human when we ate the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's when we got our moral sense. We knew the difference between right and wrong. We gained free will. We gained autonomy. We gained curiosity. We gained all of the virtues that I think we apply to ourselves as, champion virtues of humanity. That happened not when we were in this idiotic state of bliss in the garden. That happened when we disobeyed God, listened to the snake,
Right.
which has been retconned to be Satan. He's not talked about as Satan. He is the wisest of God's creatures. And he says, hey, if you eat this, you'll be like God. You'll be able to tell the difference between good and evil.
So
And
who's the
that
villain?
happened.
Who's the villain?
The snake never lied. The snake never lied. and the reason God casts us out of the garden, I say us, Adam and Eve, is not, if you actually look at the text, he says, I need to kick them out so that they no longer have access to the tree of life. Because if they have access to the tree of life, they'll maintain their, immortality and also be as gods. So they'll basically be competition. They'll be my competition if I let them stay here.
Now, God knows everything, right? God knows everything. So why did he put the tree there where they had access to it in the first place?
You see, I don't think that the God of Genesis in the Old Testament, I don't think he did know everything. That's something that now exists in modern Christian theology. But I think the way that story is written, that is not the case. God did not know that was going to happen, and he
Did he
didn't control.
create the tree?
It. Yeah, he created the tree, but he had no idea what was happening. He's like, Adam, where are you? Like, he's walking around looking for this guy. He's like, what's happening? He has no idea what's going on, and he's.
This is my point. Thank you.
And the Christian interpretation is essentially pantomime, that he was pretending to not know. But like, come on, that's not the way that
Right.
that's not the way that the authors of Genesis wrote that character.
Right. Now let's think about this. If you're a God and you're bothering to create people, did he want you to wander around just aimlessly, not aware of anything? Because until like you so openly pointed out, until we ate of that fruit, that's when we really became human, when because we dared to be curious. So were we were we destined to just wander around a garden, not knowing anything other than, this is bliss, this is how it's supposed to be, this is great? Why would he create the tree in the first place and put it in there? He's God. He could say, you know what, I'm going to set this on the other side of the planet where they can't get to it. I'm not going to put it directly in front of them and say, don't eat that. You know what that is?
Or not even make a
That's
magical tree.
yeah. But that when he puts it in right in front of you, like right in the very spot where you are, you're two people on a planet, two people. Like there's a lot of space that tree could go, but he puts it right in front of you. Okay, that's somebody that knows or that wants you to take a bite of that fruit. That's somebody that's putting it there to tempt you. That's what that's for. So it's a story that I think gets glossed over, but there's so many different little things that add up to who's really the bad guy in that story. Is it the guy that's saying, well, here's a fruit, you want knowledge, you could probably know as much as that guy, go ahead and eat it? Or is it the guy saying, yeah, I put that tree there, and yeah, if you eat it, then there's going to be a whole lot of bad shit that happens, but I could have not put it there, but I did. Who's the bad guy there? The guy that planted the tree.
Well, I think you're right, and I think the mistake comes from people. It's a moral. It's an ancient Hebrew moral parable, right? And it did not happen, and the mistake comes from assuming that that literally happened. I think it would be interesting if it was used as a moral parable, and we can do exactly what we're doing now. Like if Christians ruminated over this and they weren't obliged to have the conclusion that every single thing God does is good. Like if they could sort of stay up late at night and go, what does this mean? What is our humanity? What's consciousness? Could that be what this is talking about? That would be way better if they didn't have to think that this actually happened. That would be great because I might disagree with the morals of the story, like you say. I mean, it appears as though God is the bad guy, or at least the bad parent in this story. But it in that sense, it's not unlike Greek myths, where I go, this is kind of maybe what this story is challenging us. I might disagree with that, but I'm not obliged to agree with it. So I think that's
Greek
much more
myths own it,
morally
though.
constructive.
That's the thing. The
Yeah.
Greek gods own it. They own being assholes. Like it's built into their
Well, I don't
their
think
myths.
Yahweh, as written, was unlike those characters. I think he was like he's a grumpy. He's grumpy. He's impetuous. He is sometimes childlike. And I know this would like be really heartbreaking for a lot of people I know to be hearing this. But I mean, I think if you read him as written, he's more interesting. But then again, you don't have to think that he's the fount of all moral order in the universe, which is great
Right.
because no one demands those of the Greek gods. So it's a little bit liberating to not have to do that. I mean, I'm one of those atheists who does not throw away the Bible. I think that the as ancient human texts, they're fascinating. They're a big part of our culture, of our mythology, of our shared psyche, and a lot of our metaphors come from it. And I think it's really fascinating to look at. So I I love having these conversations, and I sometimes find it frustrating, or I wish that other people who have not been raised religious, I sort of feel like, oh man, can't we sort of like riff about how much of a bastard Samson is? But they're not familiar with the story of Samson, so we can't do that. So
We had this is where it kind of comes back full circle when I get asked, why don't you just leave it alone? Why don't you just have your non-existent faith and go do something else? Well, we've had some characters on this show before, and one comes to mind in particular. We've had him twice, and his name is Matt Powell, and he is a 22-year-old preacher, preaches at a church that
22.
Yeah, 22. But
Oh, the poor
He came
fella.
on to this. Well, don't say poor fella yet. I'm getting ready to make it to where that's not even applicable. But he sat right across from me and said that he is all for the government carrying out executions on people who are gay and unruly children to this day. Like that should be something that is instituted today in 2018, and he doesn't
Oh
back
God.
down from that. And that's why mainly it's important to be a challenge to these, because yes, you have moderate Christians, and I have a bunch of my friends are moderate Christians, and but those aren't the ones that I have my eye on. The ones that I have my eye on are those guys, because you
Yeah.
don't want them to grow in numbers, and you don't want them to start enacting legislation that, I know it sounds far fetched now, but it doesn't take a whole lot of dominoes to fall before you are at a brink. All it takes is a certain amount of Supreme Court justices to
Oh
get
God.
in
Yeah.
that lean a certain way, and then those dominoes start falling. And what seemed like something ridiculous and just so far fetched is on your doorstep. So it's important for people to continue to be loud against these horrible and bigoted
Yeah,
and dangerous
that's
ideas.
quite sick, isn't it? Yeah, and no, you're absolutely right. The one thing, see, I can't. You know how I said the poor guy, because
Oh, I know what you meant by that.
I have
I know what you meant by that. Yeah.
no, but I'm even because I even now and I feel like I can sort of put myself in his shoes. My goodness, did I never held views like that. But if
Sure.
anything, I would say that the reason I didn't hold views like that is because if I'm being honest, I was not just fully following the logical conclusions of my own moral framework, right? If I genuinely thought that the Bible was the inerrant word, like I basically think that this guy would he believe that if he wasn't a Christian? I don't think so. I think he's basically kind of trapped himself in this theological worldview where that is the conclusion he has come to based on the structure of beliefs in which he lives. And if
Yeah.
he is going to be true to himself and what he believes, that's the position he has to have. It's disgusting. Most Christians would disagree with it, but I don't think that and this is why I think it's particularly sad that people are in positions like him, because I don't think that he's a bad person, and that's the reason why he believes that. I think he wouldn't he there's not much of a reason why he would believe that um, in the year 2018. I mean, it could be that he's just a rotten human individual. That's very possible. But I genuinely just think it's more likely that if he wasn't a Christian, he just wouldn't believe that. And so I think, like you say, challenging those beliefs, challenging those frameworks, if it can kind of like free some people from putting them in a checkmate where they have to think that their gay brothers and sisters, that wayward children need to be executed, if if they're not forced to be in that position, my goodness, that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned.
It's an interesting point you raise. I'm torn on that notion. I think with, and this is just me. I can only speak for me, but in a certain sense, I think that you have to be somewhat of a bad person to not question that, and it may be the point where on the inside he doesn't really feel this way. This may be just an act on his part, a way to either look like he's strong in his faith to other believers, or
Hmm.
just a position that he's spouting off there. But deep down, I ask this question a lot to guests that we have come here. They're theists. I'll ask them at some point: is it reasonable to think that if someone dies, they are burnt for eternity for only the simple act of disbelief? Is that reasonable? And 9 times out of 10, they answer no. But I don't know all that God knows. So with
Yeah.
them, there's still that hint of humanity in there. There's still that kind of warring factions that go, okay, that's not reasonable. Like, I can't say that that's reasonable that somebody would burn for the simple act of disbelief. But if you go a step further and can say that, like if you're one of those people that can actually say that is reasonable, or can advocate for the execution of people just based on who they love, I think to a certain degree that does make you a horrible person. Like, in the face of that, you should be able to take a step back and say, maybe this God isn't worth eternal praise and glory. Yeah,
Yeah.
looking back.
So I think you're right. So I definitely sympathize with that view because in a sense I do question. I'm also of maybe almost the conflicting opinion where I think that good people are good and bad people are bad no matter what their belief systems are. So that almost just kind of like flies.
Yeah.
I think that people end up finding beliefs that validate kind of who they are, and who
Sure.
and it's no surprise that you get complete assholes with horrible views that validate their assholery, and
Right.
really good people who find the best bits of Christianity to motivate acts of love and so on, and not and ignore the rest. But I wonder, I also think this guy, he's 22, so I wonder to what extent he has actually fully confronted the reality of those beliefs. How many gay people does he actually know? Has he made a gay friend? If it actually push came to shove and he needed to act on what he says he would he? So I think, do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's pretty easy for
Well, I
him
think he
to
is one,
say.
personally.
You think what, that he is a horrible person?
I think he's projecting. I think he's struggling with some internal. This is just my opinion. Not only
Right. No, see, that's what I mean. Like, he could be internally going through
sure.
a really bad time, and this is just what's coming out. So I just think it's tricky because it is easy to think like you have horrible beliefs that make you say horrible things, and I think, like, until, I don't know, it took you 25 years to get out of it. It took me at least 24 years. Some people don't change their ways until they're 40, 50, 60 years old. So
I agree. Yeah.
I think you kind of almost need to give. It's hard, man. And I guess it's a moral object lesson that Jesus tried to teach, which is you have to believe. You have to try and believe in the best of your neighbor, which is really hard, especially if, my God, I can't believe what that must have felt like to have somebody come on and like tell you to your face that that's what he thinks should be enacted in our real world. But
there are people that honestly believe that out there, and when I said that you should rally against those, you should. If you ask me personally, and I said this on the show to him when he said that, I don't. Very rarely do I take anything personally on the show. Like, I know that there's a lot of emotions that go into this. I try my best to separate myself outside of that and not let it set me off. When he's saying this stuff, I don't believe him. I think that he's a young guy that's seeking attention or struggling with something himself. Yes, it's vile. Yes, it's disgusting. And yes, it's reprehensible.
But for him, it's virtue signaling, right? It's his way of signaling to the world. Yeah. And I think, we've come to that, an agreement on that, where if someone was saying that to me, I would genuinely, maybe I'm an optimist. And like you say, there are people in the world that unfortunately do genuinely believe such things. But if someone was, I'm eternally kind of an optimist, and I guess hoping, believing in humanity. And I think, like, if someone said that, I'd be like, you can't possibly believe that. There's no way you can possibly genuinely believe that. And I know that might be frustrating to him, because he would probably say to me, like, you can't possibly believe that this world is the only world we have and not kill yourself. And I'd be like, guess what, guy? I do. And he would say the same thing. So you get in these
I don't believe him on the killing the gays and unruly children thing, but he's still a douche. Like, his other things that he actually does believe, and the things that he spouts, he's a huge douchebag, and that
Yeah.
saves him
So you hear
none just
that,
because.
buddy? If you're out there
Yeah,
listening, there's
yeah.
two of us at least who think you're a
He,
douche.
he is. He's an attention whore. Like he got featured in Pathos, so that kicked him off on all of these ranting and tirades about how atheists are good for nothing because they play video games and drink Coke. He's just a shock.
Coke.
Yeah. And
Maybe
that's
he's.
not the worst. The funniest thing that he said, you can go to Godless Engineer, guys. You can go to Godless Engineer's channel and watch this video. But he thinks that uh, dinosaurs were with us during the Civil War. This is a
Oh
thing that he.
wow, that's.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
There
is
were.
he the guy? I think I may have seen on your Twitter feed or something. Did you retweet a picture of a pterodactyl in the
Yes, that's
Civil
him.
War?
Yeah, that's him. That's
Yeah,
him.
but that's a fake. That's not a real picture. That was a promotional material for like some sci-fi TV show.
What are you talking about? That is hands down physical proof from the like. That's the funny thing that you have here. You have a guy trying to be taken seriously going around saying let's kill gay people and unruly kids, while in the same breath saying pterodactyls were flying around with General Lee and
Yeah,
USS
it
Grant.
does sort
So, I
of
mean,
lower their credibility, doesn't it? Yeah.
yeah.
So here's to hoping. He's 22. He's got hope yet. That ginger kid who came on the after show of the Herman Mays and Jeanson debate. I was feeling
Yes.
the same way about him. I'm like, this guy. I mean, he's here arguing with a whole panel of atheists. I think he'll be okay. He'll be all right. He'll come to his senses soon enough.
Well, it's funny. Arn invited him to be a part of that phylogeny challenge, and
Yeah.
what Arn does. I don't know if many people know this or not, but it's not like a written debate formally, but he has a forum where he goes back and forth. You know, he'll bring people in, they'll have ask questions whether they agree with him or not, and they'll go back and forth. And he invited Christian, which was the guy's name, to be a part of that, and
Poetry.
never took him up on that. But you know, that's why some of them are just seeking attention. They want to be in front of the camera. They want to be the loud one. And when it comes time to actually,
they want to be the next William Lane Craig.
Yeah, but when it comes down to actually getting in a situation where you learn it, same thing with Flat Earth, where you have countless channels saying, "Let's meet here. Let me show you the evidence here. Like, let's do this experiment." They'll do all the live streams that are out there. They'll come by every show and they'll spout their BS. But when it comes time to actually being in a situation where you're learning something or where you're able to ask the questions, they're not interested. You know why? Because no one's looking.
Yes, that's a good point. I also try and put myself in their shoes, and if I was talking to like a creationist and he was like, "Hey, I have this forum where, we can publicly have this debate and you have all this reading," I would be like, "I don't want to waste my time. Like that you're just going to be feeding me bullshit. Why would I bother?" Because you're starting from the presupposition that they're wrong. So he might just be doing the same thing. He might go, I can't be bothered to hear your lies. So maybe he's just being parsimonious.
Were you really interested in learning the other half's arguments? That's
good point, because the only reason that I've taken a lot of deep dives on conspiracy shit and creationist stuff. Well, obviously having been a creationist, but yeah, you do need to have that baseline genuine interest in order to do it. So that's true.
If the shape of the planet, I will never move on. Like, I will never go to a forum or anything like that. There will never be a desire in me to want to learn that argument, just because that's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the shape of the planet is one I just can't get behind that. So anything else, I'll give credence to. It's what got me into the whole Sphinx thing. I thought that was ludicrous at first,
Sphinx.
and then I started. Yeah, I'm one of the. That's my conspiracy. I believe that the Sphinx is a little older than what we're told.
Do you believe in ancient aliens?
No. And see, that's the problem. That's why it's difficult to have this conversation. and why I bring on like if you guys notice, I did get my feet held to the fire several weeks ago with Dr. Bryson, an Egyptologist. I did bring her on, and we had our conversation, but he gets lumped in with the ancient aliens and the Anunnaki and all that. I don't think that. I think that you can go and look at places that are backed by scientists like Göbekli Tepe, who is around 11,000 to 12,000 years old, and see that we were capable of building structures, ritual places, megaliths, long before we are told. Now, there are just certain, I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but there are certain things that lead me to believe that it's older than we are told. What I think happened personally is that there was a civilization that lived on the end of the Nile at the Giza Plateau, and from where there is a recorded flood of Lake Victoria, it flew down the Nile, flooded everything in the Giza, wiped out that civilization. The Sphinx was there. And then
Kyle, are you telling me that this is Atlantis? Are these Atlanteans?
See, here we go again.
No, I'm pulling your leg.
No. I know. But you know what? You're not the first person who said that. That was the
no, but at least that's an interesting. At least that's an. Yeah, it's that would be an interesting take on it, though. If that's because that does fit with the narrative and that kind of stuff.
Well, Atlantis
hey, don't worry. I'm only pulling your leg because I happen to. I have unpopular views about Bigfoot as well, maybe along the same lines where.
Oh no.
Like,
don't do it.
Like I don't believe that Bigfoot exists, but like no, that's not it. I don't think that Bigfoot exists, but I kind of believe it. We can maybe have that discussion. We can have the discussion another time. But it's sort of very much like you, where I am pulled down by like everything that people mean by by most people mean by Bigfoot and the evidence. I'm sort of like, don't lump me in with those people. I just think it's more of a romantic.
Your balls here for making fun of me about Atlantis and ancient aliens.
No, that's why I was
throw Bigfoot at me.
That's why I was teasing you because because I'm one to talk. Mine's worse.
We should go into this one day. Bring you back on, but please tell me just one piece of why. Like I told you why I think that the Sphinx is older. I have to know just at least one piece of why you think that Bigfoot exists.
It essentially goes again. It's more of a romantic kind of hope or a desire than it is a
because you wanted to.
Yeah, but then I can't just ignore this kind of baseline nagging sense of but like what if that's always there, and like no matter how much skepticism I apply to it, and I know all the evidence is bad and substandard, I just have that what people refer to, I guess I often use this subject as an analog for talking about religious belief, because it's kind of what people mean by that. Like, you just can't get rid of it. And for me, it's just there. God with Bigfoot. Bigfoot is my idol. Yeah, that's right. No, I just kind of think it's plausible enough that it makes me just kind of default to thinking, hey, that would be pretty cool if it was out there.
It would be cool,
but don't take it. I'll tell you, don't take it too seriously.
10 minutes down the road from me is a city called Marion, North Carolina, and a month ago, the mayor of Marion declared that Marion's new official animal is Bigfoot. So that's literally 10 minutes from me. They had a rally on a Saturday and everything. He is the Bigfoot. Seriously, Bigfoot is the official animal of the city of Marion, North Carolina. Now, just think about that.
Well, see, I would say that they're nuts. I'd say they're nuts, and I don't believe most people's eyewitness accounts of Bigfoot. I think there's good explanations for all of it. So yeah. I just thought I would throw that in there, basically to you've got your you've got your not ancient aliens. You've got your slightly ancienter civilization pet.
Yeah, just older
pet
and
belief.
smarter. See, I'm just saying that
Older and
that we
smarter.
were older, or that we were able to do things earlier, and we were a little bit smarter than what science gives us credit for. That's all I'm saying. I'm not going any more past that.
I'll frame mine then as I think there are hominids that are older and hairier in North America than Homo sapiens.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Deep down, though, every one of you out there has a conspiracy theory that you either want to be true or you believe in. Okay,
that's it.
We're just
admitting
brave
it
enough to put it out there. Smarter.
Yeah. The difference being, I'm not gonna smarter, older, and hairier. Yeah, I mean, so Kyle, if we're being honest, it's possible that a civilization of Sasquatch are the species that built the Sphinx.
I actually wrote that down to talk to you about off air. I didn't think that the audience would be able to handle all of that conspiracy in one show. That's right. But
we're gonna have to start a blog.
So since we're kind of we're to the 90-minute mark now, let's go through one of your pieces. Maybe you can tell us the story. I picked out quite a few that I thought were really good, like that I really liked. And we'll move you over here on the conspiracy side with me, and Dave will throw up. Let's go through.
Cool. Yeah. Now that I've completely ruined all of my credibility with that. No, just to put a cap on that. Don't take that too seriously. I'm having a bit of fun, but.
Yeah, that's like I said, people. You all believe in a conspiracy, okay? We're just brave enough to put ourselves out there. Our hearts are on our sleeve right now. His is a little bit hairier than mine, and mine is just older and wiser.
That's right.
We can stretch that out.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
as long as we need.
I can see. Yes, that is filthy. Yeah, I can see the comic up on the screen now. So okay. I've also got a paper copy with me here.
Perfect. My camera is like falling. All right. So what is the what I did was I split it up into 3 pieces. So you know how you have like the 3 strips to be able to fit it in that window. I took it into like 3 different pieces. So this is going to be the top section, cool. And then once we read through, he'll just bump it up to the next one. But let's set the stage for this. What gave you the inspiration for this, and how did you kind of map out where you were going to go with it?
For this section of the comic specifically, or the comic in general?
This section right here.
Okay, so I mean, just a little bit of context about the comic overall, which I'm holding and is available online as well. It's sort of like gosh, I don't even know how long it is. 18, 20 pages, representing the research of a research project here in the UK, looking at kind of religion and science, particularly evolution within society. So it's not asking scientific questions; it's more sociological in nature and looking about, how do these two things interact within society in the UK and also in Canada, which is interesting to me because I'm both Canadian and live in the UK. So I saw the opportunity to communicate their research in a medium of my choice. I chose to do it as a comic. And this section here that you have up on the screen is representing a part of that research. It's an interdisciplinary project with psychologists, sociologists, philosophers, historians, and so on. So this is the sociological and psychological section. I'm actually just looking for it in my book as well.
Dave, switch to the
there it
next
is.
one real quick.
Yeah, so this is a researcher. Her name's Carissa Sharp and also Stephen Jones. They're sociologists of religion and social psychologists. And it's essentially exploring the idea of cognitive dissonance, right? So those of you who are watching this podcast are probably familiar, or YouTube video are probably familiar with cognitive dissonance, but it's assumed that if you are a religious person who accepts science, you're going to be going through some nasty cognitive dissonance, right? You've compartmentalized your beliefs into this and that. And that's what this panel here is showing. He's kind of talking about that. You have these incompatible beliefs that can't be reconciled, so they just put them in different boxes. But these researchers, really took a deep dive, talking to loads of religious individuals from different faith backgrounds, and not just Christians. They were interviewing Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, Buddhists, and non-religious people, etc. They had quite a range of different beliefs. And what I found most interesting, which is why I kind of pulled it out of the research, this comic is as much my input as I'm basically looking at the raw material of their research and just drawing out what I think is the most interesting. And I thought, rather than most salient to the individuals of religious people is not this cognitive dissonance, but the social dissonance that comes from that. So they will have found some way of reconciling it, whether or not we would agree with the way they did that or not. They have gelled science and their religious beliefs and their evolution together in such a way that satisfies whatever their requirements are to move on with their daily lives. But they don't necessarily relate to that cognitive dissonance that we might impose on them. We say, you have cognitive dissonance. That doesn't seem to resonate with them. Instead, it's this social dissonance where society expects them not to be able to get along internally with these two conflicting beliefs. So they impose that on them, even though, I've got this panel here where I've depicted a Muslim girl who is visibly Muslim. So she's wearing a headscarf. She's also got an I Love Science t-shirt on, and she's proud of both of these things in her life. They're obviously two ways that she chooses to identify and represent herself to the world. And then we have these kind of murmuring faces that are going, are you serious? How can you love science and also be a Muslim?
Trump supporters.
And sadly, yeah, but in the far right of that panel, sadly, this represents a lot of what we see in cases like this, where people who are sort of forced to choose between those two identities will cover up. She's covered up the science T-shirt because she feels embarrassed, and if that's constantly challenged by friends and strangers, even colleagues, if she feels that she's not welcome in scientific pursuits or pursuing that interest, then that's going to be very alienating. And I think that's kind of shitty of people to do that, really, to just assume that she hasn't thought about this. Oh, how can you think evolution's true if you also think the Quran is true? You obviously are not intelligent, or you're not a real science enthusiast, or you're not a real Muslim. So that's kind of what I'm representing in these panels here.
It was very well done. How long does it take? How long did it take you to do this entire project? Like, how long does something like this take?
I initially met with the research project, so I went up and I did some interviews with a bunch of the researchers. When was that? Last August. So last August I started on this, and then I finished it. It was all ready and sent off to print in February. How long is that? Like 6 months ish. So it took me 6 months to do.
That's actually good.
Yeah, I kind of went hell bent for leather on it. I just kind of went down a bit of a. I didn't do much else with my life at the time, because it was when I started on the project, I had pitched doing 6 pages of finished comic to represent the research that I would do in 2 months. But then as I started digging into it, I was like, oh, there's a lot of rich material to mine here. So I just sort of said, oh, do you mind if I'll do this section in 3 pages instead of 2. Oh, I'll do this one in 3 instead of 1. And then next thing you know, I've got the 6-month project. So yeah, it was good fun though. And the bulk of the actual time consuming work came from trying to sift through all the research and represent it in what I felt was an accurate way to them, but also what I was interested in. So I tried to bring my own commentary through the text in there as well, but I was obviously very mindful of the fact that I'm essentially being commissioned not to pipe up with my own opinion, but to, represent what the research is. And it was actually quite a challenge for me, because in some respects, the conclusions of the research, the data kind of ran contrary to what a lot of my assumptions were, which is interesting because that's in fact what exactly a portion of the research is looking at anyway, is how there's a lot of these expectations that don't necessarily reflect the reality of religious belief in the UK and in Canada. So it is a different portrait in the United States and elsewhere, but the UK is a different kettle of fish. There are creationists here, but they're definitely not out in the same kind of force as they are in America, or heck, in the subculture in Canada that I was raised in. So
Absolutely. This one, we'll close out on this one, and if you guys want to check out something that is I was going through a lot of them last night. I mean, he's very talented, and they're very well done. The link will be in the description to where you can get your copy. But this one I really liked right here. Your political how you lay this out.
Yeah, so this is actually kind of a controversial one. That's overstated, but I have had people kind of chew me out on Twitter about it. But I did this comic as part of a piece for an online comic website called The Nib, and they do lots of political commentary and stuff like that. Anyway, do you remember there was the March for Science that was happening, I think, last March? Was it March? I don't know. There was the March for Science. I participated in that here in the UK as well, but they had asked a bunch of cartoonists, myself included, to write a piece on what it's like to be a science communicator in the current kind of, I guess, moderately anti-science culture that we're currently living in for some reason, and the politics surrounding that. So in a set, I don't know if you can see the whole thing on this, but I over the course of 4 panels, I say, but science isn't political, which is sort of the mantra of a lot of people, myself included. It wasn't too long ago when I thought that, essentially in its Platonic form, in its ideal, existing in a vacuum state, science is, I almost called it a truth engine. So it's not going to arrive at truth, but it's ever working to. It's a self-correcting mechanism to weed out things that aren't true and come closer to an approximation of what the real world is. Let's say that instead of truth. Unfortunately, nothing really works as a perfect machine. If internal combustion engines worked perfectly, there would be a lot less pollution that comes out of that. You should get very different chemical arrangement, but combustion happens imperfectly in the real world, at least with the technology that we have now. So you're left with noxious fumes. And because humans are the one who do science, and because science exists within governmental frameworks, and governments fund things and they don't fund other things, and it's every step of the way humans making those decisions, it is practically, in the real world, impossible to separate the practice of science from politics. Because I know, people say, "Oh, keep your politics out of my media. Keep your politics out of my comics." For those of you who are involved in the whole Comicsgate scandal, keep your politics out of my. You're a scientist on Twitter. You should just be commenting about science instead of politics. But pretty much everything has political implications. There's other people that it affects, and it comes about through a political process. So I basically chose 4 really quite ham-fistedly obvious examples of where politics and science have kind of overlapped. We've got JFK going to the moon. There's a lot of science involved in that, a lot of great engineering, a lot of pure blue sky research involved from the people of NASA and those involved. But we would be kidding ourselves if we did not acknowledge the fact that the mission to the moon was a political stunt as much as anything. It had political motivation, and the government, the government funded that at the expense of other things that it could have been funding. Think of all the civil rights issues at the time, when that money could have been used. I'm not suggesting it shouldn't have been used the way it was.
Oh, but it wasn't.
But
we didn't go to the moon, Jordan. Everybody knows that we didn't go to the moon.
I've got another comic, where I've got a panel of Stanley Kubrick directing the moon landing. It's on Occam's Razor that I wrote.
See, his comics are factual.
That's right. Well, I did that in collaboration with a friend of mine named Rick Worth. We collaborate loads. He's a really talented writer. I'll usually work with him on more kind of story-oriented comics, whereas if I'm working on something that might just be more nonfiction, science-oriented, I tend to kind of do that myself here. And then in the last panel there is Donald Trump scribbling with a crayon an executive order, and he's tweeting a real tweet that he did. I think he said worse things since, but he says, climate change is a dangerous hoax perpetrated by the Chinese. And of course, he's going to be, as we've seen, that politics actually affects the way that science is done. And I know this is what people always criticize this comic for, is they say, yes, but it shouldn't. And yes, but eventually, that doesn't change the fact that climate change is real. And I'm saying, I know that's not the point I'm trying to prove. I'm just saying it's also a little naive to just think that science is immune to all of the humanity and all of the shitstorm of politics that happens around it, because it exists in this world, and it unfortunately needs to operate in those parameters. And that sometimes means that bad things happen. Well, I've got Oppenheimer and the bomb. I think that's that's one of my favorite examples of that, because that's a really complicated one. Once again, you have the best scientific minds on the planet, at least of the Allied forces, applying themselves to this otherwise blue sky thinking, abstract scientific pipe dream. These physicists would have loved to look at splitting the atom. They finally have the means to do it. Why? Because the government wants to create a weapon. And they do create the weapon, and they were so focused on creating it, Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, so focused on asking whether we could, you didn't stop to think whether we should. And I think it's almost an impossible decision if they were given that opportunity. Once the bomb was created, they weren't the ones who dropped it, but thousands and thousands of people lost their lives as a result of that research. In a time of war, when it did it need to be dropped? And then this is where we're blurring the lines very, very easily between science and the research that happened and the way that research impacts the world and human lives, right? That's political. Yep. As political as anything I can imagine is.
It's an impossible question. That's one of those questions that, once again, I'm stuck in the middle. I see both sides of it. I see the side that says, if the bomb didn't exist, then all these people would have lost their lives. But then again, how many did it save? How many did it stop from dying in the future? And so I'm just stuck in the middle and can't, I hate questions like that. Questions like that there's no clear, and I know that there will be people that say that there are clear answers, but I don't think that there is. If you think about it, how many, by dropping that bomb, that stopped Japan from making any more kind of, advances on.
They didn't surrender, right? They defeated Germany, but the Japanese hadn't given up yet. I suppose you could question, did we need to drop the second bomb as well? At that point, it's sort of, we made the toy. Should we give it a try?
Yeah.
Which is challenging, but I really like a quote by Richard Feynman. He's a physicist, or was a physicist, in the States, and he said that science, in front of us there are two doors. One is the door to heaven, and one is the door to hell. And science we're holding a key, and that's science, and it can open both doors. So science is neither inherently good nor bad. It is amoral. It is apolitical. But it's capable of unleashing, both good and evil by our standards in our world. and it's the way that we use. It's what door we choose to open with that key. And I think that's right. I think that I very much agree with him on that one, and I like the metaphor as well.
I say what you do is you use the key to break off in heaven's lock, and then throw the keys down into hell, and just chill on the middle floor where it's not too hot and not too praise Jesus-y. Crack you open some beers and have a good time.
Yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it?
So I think that what I'll do is get one of your comics and take it to Marion and set it out in case Bigfoot would like to share in your work as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I would love to. I might make a Bigfoot comic one day. I have
should.
designs to make. I might be making a Bigfoot helping John Perry to write a Bigfoot script for a Stated Clearly channel as well. Not
Bigfoot Goes
looking
to the Sphinx.
Ghost of the Sphinx. Yeah, that sounds like a great title to a book. Bigfoot Ghost of the Sphinx.
That's a seller right there. That's a seller. Well, Jordan, thank you so much for coming by. This was a fantastic talk. I love these kind of conversations where you can get to what makes people tick and how they see different. If it's not the most important issue of our life, like what our lives now and our afterlife, I think that's why people flock to these kind of talks, because it deals with things that not only affect us now, but some believe affect us in the future. And everybody's life is kind of centered around that in the grand scheme of things. Like, you plan out your weeks, your days, your months, your years around that ideology, and just make sure that it's planned around something that you feel comfortable with. For those of you who are listening at home, make sure it's something that you feel 100% sure with, whichever side that it may be, whether it be religion or no religion. But you only get one of these on this planet. Like, whether it's true or not, you only get one of these to experience the things that you're experiencing now. And just make sure you experience them and not miss out. And I'm going to leave it to Jordan to have the final word and plug anything that he would like. Let everybody know where they can follow him and take us out.
Yeah, well, just thanks very much for having me on. It's been a really fun conversation. Yeah, like you, I just enjoy. Gosh, we went into some pretty unexpected territories, but I always like that kind of stuff. It just sort of reminds me of chatting at the pub, talking about lots of cool things. So yeah, it's been really fun. And if for those watching, if you're on Twitter, the best place to find me is on Twitter, I guess, which is just at Jordan Collver, which is my name, JordanCollver. And I post kind of my work and retweet other things I like. There we go. There's a brief description of how Twitter works. And then otherwise, yeah, just Google my name. You'll find my portfolio. Should be the top hit. You can check out some of my other work. And if you want to read my comic on science religion that we took a quick look at tonight, it's on my portfolio online, so you can just read that all for free there. Or if you'd rather get a paper copy that looks something like this, send me an email or get in touch with me on Twitter, and I will just mail you one, because the research project funded the printing and stuff like that. So I can ship those out to you. So yeah, I'd love to know what you think. And yeah, again, it's just been a pleasure to be here and kind of chat about it.
Excellent. And we will have you back for that. I am going to take you up on that Bigfoot talk. So,
oh boy,
we'll have you back.
I've overstepped. Cool. Yeah, I look forward to it.
Dave, did you any questions that you saw or anything on your end? I'm on my tablet, so I can't keep up with the live chat.
We had a couple super chats, but if you want me to go ahead and read those,
yes,
they're both from Sigifredo. I don't know how to say that. Sarabia. For $10, the first one. The first one's $10. Thank you very much. As the term sin is linked to divine law by definition, how implacable and reasonable do you think the use of the word sin is by an atheist non-believer. I'm not sure what the point of the question is, but
I mean, I think again, as I referenced, the Bible has a lot of cultural relevance in our world, just as a historical artifact of where we came from and kind of what's relevant to us. So the word sin, I think, has a pretty obvious implications for most people. I don't use it anymore in my life, but I think, people know it sort of just come to mean bad things. But I guess that my answer to your question is it doesn't need to be used by atheists because, yeah, like you say, it's referring to God's moral law. I don't believe that such a law exists, and therefore, yeah, I just choose not to use it. However, some people do, and I'm not going to like chew them out for it because I get the point. So
I do for ice cream. Like, this is so sinful, I shouldn't be doing this. That is totally acceptable in those cases.
okay.
yeah,
And number 2, the second one is also from Sigifredo for $2. And he says, what happened to comics? Hashtag go Rams 7-0.
oh,
What happened to comics?
sports.
He must not
Right.
be. I guess he's not a fan of the trajectory of certain comics.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't
he's
think
either or
yeah. I
maybe
don't think
because we started out talking about comics and then we ended up talking about non-comics, but
Right.
that could be what he means. Otherwise, what happened to the comics? Go to a comic store. There's a lot of them now.
Yeah. Well, I think
Yeah,
he
we
was just. I think he was
we
just
did
being
we did
silly.
go away from the comics. I'm just
Yeah.
I'm just getting that realization. But I think it was a necessary shift
Well, yeah.
to get to a deeper conversation. I think, which was good.
Yeah,
Like,
and
I love that.
I try and bring that experience, the backstory that we were talking about. I try and bring that into the comics. Like that's the context that I'm
Right.
that I'm writing in. So yeah, I think that's valuable.
Perfect.
And that's
Dave?
it. That's it.
Awesome. Well, I guess I probably, before the screw ups with the audio, I want to thank you guys for watching. I will leave you with some updates on Steve. Dave, has anyone asked about Steve?
No, but Steve did contact me on Hangouts, and he said didn't see it was at 3:30 today, so he was under the impression it was at 8 o'clock as usual. That's why
He was. What did I say? Steve, if you want an update on Steve, just head over to Steve's channel and watch last night's rum and Coke, and everything will be. Yeah, that will give you everything you need to know. But we wish him well in his recovery from his hangover.
It will become
rest
clear.
up, big fella.
It will become clear.
We're praying
thank
for
you
you,
guys
Steve.
for. We are absolutely cheeseburgers and Gatorade works every time. We will see you back here tomorrow at 8 o'clock for climate change. Not controversial at all. And hopefully look for the poll that will be going up before that. I'll probably put it out tomorrow morning. But go and vote. I want to see where people are sitting at, whether they think it's man-made or just part of a cycle that we go through. So for all of us here at NonSequitur, we will catch you tomorrow. And thanks again, Jordan, for coming by. This was fantastic.
Thanks.
Non sequitur. Your facts are uncoordinated.